OM Parkash Grover vs. S. Singhal, suit numbers 9346816 and 96022316, 2016. Introduction. The case of OM Parkash Grover vs. S. Singhal, 2016, is an important judgment which explains the difference between civil disputes and consumer disputes. The main issue before the court was whether every dispute arising out of a contract can be treated as a consumer dispute. The court clarified that only those disputes which involve a consumer relationship and deficiency of service fall under consumer law, while pure property or contractual disputes must be decided by civil courts. This judgment is very useful for understanding the jurisdiction of consumer forums. Facts of the case. In this case, OM Parkash Grover entered into a transaction with S. Singhal related to property and financial dealings. A dispute arose between the parties regarding performance of obligations under the agreement. OM Parkash Grover alleged that S. Singhal had failed to fulfill his promises and had caused him loss. On this basis, he approached the consumer forum claiming relief, treating the matter as a consumer dispute. However, the opposite party argued that the dispute was purely civil in nature, involving contractual obligations and property rights, and therefore it could not be decided by a consumer forum. According to him, the proper remedy was to file a civil suit, not a consumer complaint. Issues before the court. The main issue before the court was whether the dispute between the parties could be treated as a consumer dispute, or whether it was a civil dispute relating to contract and property, which should be decided only by a civil court. Another issue was whether the complainant could be considered a consumer under the Consumer Protection Act. Judgment of the court. The court held that not every dispute arising out of a contract can be treated as a consumer dispute. The court observed that consumer forums are meant to provide quick and simple remedies for cases involving deficiency in service or unfair trade practices, and not for deciding complicated issues relating to property rights, title, or detailed contractual obligations. The court found that the dispute in the present case was essentially related to enforcement of contractual terms and civil rights, which required proper evidence and detailed examination. Such matters are beyond the scope of consumer forums. Therefore, the court ruled that the consumer forum lacked jurisdiction to entertain the complaint. Reasoning of the court. The court explained that to qualify as a consumer dispute, there must be a clear consumer-service provider relationship. In the present case, the transaction was not purely for hiring services, but involved contractual and property matters. The court emphasized that consumer law cannot be used as a shortcut to bypass civil courts. If such disputes are allowed before consumer forums, it would defeat the purpose of civil courts and overburden consumer forums. Legal principles laid down. The court laid down the important principle that consumer protection law has limited jurisdiction. It applies only when there is deficiency of service or unfair trade practice in a consumer relationship. Pure civil disputes involving contracts, property, or monetary recovery must be resolved through civil suits. The judgment clearly draws a line between consumer law and civil law. Significance of the judgment. This judgment is significant because it prevents misuse of consumer forums. It ensures that consumer forums remain focused on genuine consumer grievances. It also guides students and legal practitioners in choosing the correct forum for legal remedies. The case is frequently cited to show that consumer forums are not substitutes for civil courts. Conclusion. In conclusion, OM Parkash Grover vs. S. Singhal, 2016, is an important case that clarifies the scope of consumer jurisdiction. The court rightly held that disputes involving contractual obligations and property matters are civil in nature and must be decided by civil courts. The judgment protects the purpose of consumer law and maintains a clear distinction between civil disputes and consumer disputes. This case is very important for LLB students, especially for understanding jurisdiction and remedies under different laws.